All right, Act 5, Julius Caesar. I gotta tell you, I love Caesar, but recording all of this Caesar in one shot, whew, this is a lot. But I'm excited because this is it. Act 5 is the resolution. That's where everything gets all tied up and it gives us the closure that we need in order to go away from the story and feel like we know what's going on. So, at the end of Act 4, we have our plan. Brutus and Cassius are marching to Philippi at the behest of Caesar's ghost, who appeared to Brutus and says, "Thou shalt see me at Philippi." Antony, Octavius, and Lepidus are heading towards Sardis. They don't know that Brutus and Cassius are going to meet them in Philippi. They think they will have to go the whole direction, but they are going to find out soon that they are going to meet them in the middle. Okay? So, all right. So now that we are ready and we're on our way, we are on the plains of Philippi. Now, the war situation in this time period is very, very different than war is now. There's no sneak attacks, there's no bombings or anything. Basically, they just lined up all of their soldiers, and then the generals came into the middle and they bickered back and forth, and then they went back to their own sides, and somebody says go, and you just charge at each other. And so you just kill people until somebody runs out of people to kill, basically, or they run away and say, I don't want any more people killed. So they are on the plains of Philippi, and they have their two things set up here. And so Octavius and Antony, they've kind of kicked Lepidus out at this point, come up, and Brutus and Cassius come up, and they start arguing. Dumb stuff, you know. Oh, nice of you to threat before you sting, and you didn't do that to Caesar, and blah, 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 blah. Octavius says, I draw a sword against the conspirators, and never until the 33 wounds of Caesar will be added to the slaughter of traitors, blah, blah, blah. And he says, you can't kill a traitor unless you brought him with you, and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, goes on. And Octavius says, we're done. We're not talking anymore. So if you want, you give the call. Whenever you're ready, we're ready. So they go back, and Cassius and Brutus stay, and they're talking. Cassius says, look, I was feeling pretty good about this. First of all, it's my birthday. And I was feeling pretty good about this because when we left Sardis, two mighty eagles were soaring with us. And they were with us the whole time we were marching to Philippi. But once we got here, the eagles left, and they were replaced by buzzards, and the kind of birds that eat dead things, which doesn't sound like a very good omen. So I'm not feeling as confident as I was before. So Brutus is like, yeah, it's nothing. You don't let that get to you or whatever. Everything's gonna be fine. He's like, okay, but look, we need to have a hard conversation. Hopefully we will win and everything will be great. But there's also a chance that that's not what's gonna happen. And if that is the case, what are we gonna do? Because they will take us prisoner. They won't kill us. They will take us prisoner, and they will lead us through the streets of Rome as a slave. They will put us on leashes and torture us, and it'll be really bad. So are we going to allow that to happen, or are we going to take our own lives, basically? Are we going to prevent them from capturing us if it gets to that point? Brutus says, I do find it cowardly and vile to do that. I do not think taking your life when things aren't going your way is a very good thing to do. That doesn't fall under his philosophy. However, I cannot be taken back to Rome as a slave. I just cannot stand that. I just cannot handle that. So if it comes down to the last chance we have, that's what we'll have to do. I'll just have to take my own life. So that's the plan. hopefully everything goes great. Nobody gets killed. But if not, they will take their own lives before they allow themselves to be taken prisoner. So, Brutus says, "Forever and forever farewell, Cassius. If we do meet again, why, we shall smile. If not, then this parting was well made. Oh, that a man might know the end of this day's business ere it come, but it sufficeth that the day will end, and then the end is known." So basically he says, I hope that at the end of this day, we will come back together and everything will be great. But if we don't, then this is a good parting between us. We're parting as friends, basically. We're on good terms. And so that's it. That's the end of scene 1. They get ready and they go to battle. Scene 2 is very short. It is just Brutus giving the call. Remember, Octavius told Brutus that he was going to give Brutus the opportunity to give the call. So Brutus gives the call that he's ready to start the battle. Okay, pause for a second while I change the board. Okay, so Act 5, Scene 2 is Brutus. Remember, in Scene 1, Octavius gave him the power, basically, to say, we're ready when you're ready, so you give the call. So we have Antony and Octavius. And they are lined up against Cassius and Brutus. So, Brutus sees that he has the advantage over Octavius. So in Scene 2, he says go. He's ready. He's got everything lined up. He gives the call to go. Antony, however, is overpowering Cassius. And so Cassius is not ready. So when we go into Scene 3, Cassius, who has Titinius with him, says, "Oh, Cassius, Brutus gave the word too early." So Brutus is in good shape. Cassius is not in good shape. And so Titinius and Cassius and Pindarus, who's Cassius's servant, go up this mountain to kind of get away from the battle and try to reassess. And they can't see. So Cassius sends Titinius, his friend, down the hill because there's their camp is down there and it looks like they're being invaded. And so he sends Titinius down the hill to see what's going on. He sends Pindarus up the hill to get a better viewpoint of Titinius because he can't see him at that point. So Pindarus is at the top of the hill and Titinius is at the bottom of the hill. Pindarus says that Titinius rides down the hill, is surrounded by horsemen, yanked off his horse, and killed. Cassius is so distraught that he sent his friend to his death that he asks his servant, Pindarus, to come back down. And he says, "Pindarus, hold my sword." Swords are long. You can't stab yourself with a sword very well. You don't have good angle. So, you hold my sword, and I'm going to hide my face. When I'm done, you stab me. And so he gives Pindarus a sword, he hides his face, and Pindarus stabs him. Cassius is dead. Then Pindarus says, "Okay, slave, bloody sword, dead master, I got to get the hell out of Dodge." So he takes off. He's gone. Then Titinius comes back. Now, recap. Titinius went down the hill. Pindarus said he was surrounded by enemy troops, taken off the horse, and killed. That leads Cassius to have Pindarus assist in his suicide. However, what actually happened is Titinius rode down the hill and he was surrounded by Brutus's troops. Brutus had just defeated Octavius. And so they surrounded him, took him off the horse to celebrate Brutus's victory. Oops. Pandarus misunderstood, again, mixing up the message. So Titinius is so distraught that Cassius killed himself over Titinius's fake death, that Titinius kills himself. He throws himself on Cassius's sword too. So now we got 2 dead bodies. Not good. So, Messala and some of the others come up and see what has happened, and they realize that it was all a misunderstanding. Brutus comes in and he says, "O Julius Caesar, thou art mighty yet. Thy spirit walks abroad and turns our sword in our own proper entrails. Friends, I owe more tears to this dead man than you shall see me pay. I will find time, Cassius. But 'tis 3 o'clock, and Romans, yet ere night we shall try fortune in a second fight." So basically round 1 is over. Brutus defeated Octavius, but Cassius's army was defeated by Antony. So basically they're 1 for 1 at this point. So now we have Brutus's army going against Antony's army. So that's going to be round 2. Okay. Now, Act 5, Scene 4. We're in round 2, and things aren't going very well. Brutus has escaped to this mountain to get away and try to reassess, but he's basically getting his butt handed to him by Antony. And so in Scene 4, we have Lucilius pretending to be Marcus Brutus, pretending to be Brutus. He's not. It's just a distraction to try to get Antony away while Brutus has his own moment to try to figure out what's going on, to regroup. So Brutus is apart from everybody. Act 5, Scene 5. And he speaks to Clitus, Dardanius, and Volumnius. And he asks them, we don't know exactly, he whispers, it's an aside, we can't hear. But we can assume by their reaction, he is asking them to help in his suicide. They say no way, couldn't do it. And so he says, look, guys, I know my hour is come. Our enemies have beat us to the pit. It is more worthy to leap in ourselves than tarry till they push us. So he says, I've lost. It's done. I can take pride in giving up and turning myself over instead of waiting until they come and take me, basically. And so he already asked Clitus Dardanius, and he says, Volumnius, look, we went to school together. Please, they all 3 say no. So he says, look, guys, it's okay. I feel good about this. I found my heart doth joy that yet in all my life I found no man but he was true to me. I feel good about it. I have been honest and truthful my whole life, and everyone I have come in contact with has done the same, which is a big lie. Of course everyone has not been truthful to him. Basically no one has, but he's very trusting and whatever, and so he doesn't see it. So finally he asks Strato, and he says, Strato, I need your help. Strato says, okay. So he says, Strato, take my sword, turn your face, and when you have done that, I will throw myself on the sword. So Cassius said, hold my sword, I'm going to turn my face, and then you stab me. Brutus said, hold my sword, you turn your face, and I will throw myself on it. Just kind of a difference in people. And so that's what happened. Brutus says, Caesar, now be still. I killed not thee with half so good a will. And he throws himself on his own sword and dies. Around this time, Octavius comes in, Antony comes in. They have been searching for him. They found him. And Antony says of dead Brutus, "This was the noblest Roman of them all. All the conspirators, save only he, did that they did in envy of great Caesar. He only in a general honest thought and common good to all made one of them." So even Antony, his enemy, said that Brutus was a noble Roman and that he only did what he did for the good of Rome, that he did what he thought was right. He didn't have any ulterior motives. He wasn't driven by selfish reasons. He did what he thought was right. And so even though he lost, he is still honored after his death. And that is the end. That's the end of the play. Hooray! Okay, so Act 5 study guide. Number 113, blank asked Brutus if the latter would be willing to be led through the streets of Rome. So that's when Cassius and Brutus are having their conversation. Cassius asked Brutus if he would be willing to be led through the streets of Rome, and he replied that he would not. He would not do that. Before the battle, Brutus and Cassius said farewell to each other. They make a pact. Everything's fine. They're good between them. Act 5, Scene 2, remember, is just Brutus saying go. So there's no questions from that. Act 5, Scene 3. Blank reported that blank had given the word too early and they were surrounded by the forces of blank. So when Brutus gave the word, it was because he was against Octavius and he felt like he could win. So he just said go. But Cassius is going against Antony and it's not looking so good. So 115, Titinius reports that Brutus had given the word too early and they were surrounded by the forces of Antony. Blank asked blank to ride over to learn whether troops nearby were friends or enemies. So Cassius asked Titinius to ride down the hill and see what's going on. He asked Pindarus to go up the hill to watch and see what's happening. Pindarus reported that Titinius had been surrounded by horsemen. When blank asked blank to kill him, the latter, what? So after that, he's so sad, Cassius asked Pindarus to help him kill himself, and he agrees. He obeys. That's what he's told. And then he takes off. So then when Titinius returned, he found that Cassius was dead. Pindarus had been mistaken when he told Cassius that Titinius was captured by the enemy. 122. The true story was that Brutus had defeated Octavius. Titinius, discouraged by the death of Cassius, killed himself. So everybody's died. 124. When Brutus entered and saw the dead bodies, he remarked the spirit of Caesar was still powerful. So he gives Caesar the credit for creating all of this chaos that ends in all these deaths. He thinks Caesar is responsible. Okay, Act 5, Scene 5. Again, Act 5, Scene 4 is just that little scene with Cato and Lucilius trying to distract Antony. There's no questions there. Act 5, Scene 5. Brutus first asked Clitus and Dardanius to help him commit suicide, and they refused. And then he asked his old friend from school, Volumnius, and he refuses. So finally he asked, 126, Strato to hold the sword, and Brutus throws himself on it. As he was dying, he said, Caesar, now be still. I killed not thee with half so good a will. So he did not feel nearly as good about killing Caesar as he did about killing himself. He knew that this was the right thing to do. And he was mostly sure about Caesar, but he didn't feel as confident as he does now. Caesar, now be still. 128. Antony called Brutus the noblest Roman of them all. Even as his enemy, he sees that what Brutus did was a patriotic act. So he sees him as a noble Roman, even though they were enemies. And that's the end. Not to do that. Build vocabulary with the prefix miss. Miss means bad or wrong. We've talked about that in vocab before. So again, it's just miss words, put them in there, and then use the word bank, look the words up. Okay. Reading strategy, cause and effect. Just like in life, one thing happens, which causes another thing to happen, which causes another thing to happen, which causes another thing to happen. So, it is asking you to start with Julius Caesar's death and do cause and effect all the way up to this last box. Now, I have found in doing this, the easiest way is to start at the end. Antony calls Brutus the noblest Roman and move backwards. That way you know how many boxes you need to fill, but you can do whatever. So basically, Julius Caesar is killed, which caused Antony to vow to punish the people responsible, which causes what? Which causes what? Which causes what? Okay, so just work around until you get to the end, which is Antony calls Brutus the noblest Roman. Literary analysis, tragedy. We're going to talk more about this even past this, but a tragedy has a central action and a main character who is considered noble, but who has a character flaw or weakness that brings his downfall. The downfall is the theme of the tragedy. You know, theme is the main idea. So this worksheet attests, now we've always talked about there's lots of different themes, but this worksheet attests that the theme is, O error soon conceived, thou never comest to a happy birth, but killed the mother that engendered thee. In other words, when you make a big mistake, you have to pay for it. Okay? So, if we are working under the opinion that that is one of the main themes, when you make a big mistake, you have to pay for it. How does this play into it? So, Caesar's assassination, that's the big mistake. So that's what sets the theme going. Antony and Octavius are engaged in a civil war against Cassius and Brutus. How does that apply to the big mistake and paying for it? Okay, so just go through here, look at these scenarios, and try to figure out how they connect to that idea of you make a big mistake and you have to pay for it. Even if you did it for the right reasons, you still have to pay for it. Okay. Finally, the last writing assignment has to do with that same idea of a tragic hero. In order to be a tragic hero in a Shakespearean play, you must have 4 characteristics. Number 1, you must be a main character. The cobbler is not a tragic hero. You have to be a main character. So we're talking Caesar, Antony, Brutus, Cassius. Basically, those are the only ones that even could be in the running. Number 2, you must have a character flaw. Character flaw is not like a big nose. A character flaw has something to do with yourself as a person, okay? Something that is wrong with you personally. And wrong with you is kind of it's kind of harsh, but, you know, a flaw that has to do with you as a person. The character must die because of this character flaw. So, for instance, let's say my character flaw is procrastination. I never do anything until the last minute, and then I regret it. So that procrastination does not actually cause my death. But maybe the fact that I waited until I was already going to be late for something, and so I'm speeding really fast to get to something, and I have a car accident, maybe that procrastination was part of the reason I died. Okay, so my character flaw contributed to my death. And finally, you have to maintain honor after death, which means even after I'm dead, people still honor me in one way or another. Okay, so with all that in mind, the question is Caesar a tragic hero? Explain in detail why or why not and address each of the 4 traits. So you are going to do the same thing as you did before, 8 to 10 sentences, at least 1 citation, and you are going to tell me, yes, Caesar is, or no, Caesar isn't. Okay? Make sure you address each of the 4 traits. That's what I'm going to be specifically looking for when I grade this. 4 traits, yes or no. It can't be sort of. It's either yes or no. So, as an example, let's talk about Brutus, okay? You are writing about Caesar, so we're clear. Don't write this essay that I'm getting ready to write to you about Brutus. You write about Caesar. I'm going to use Brutus as an example, okay? Pause while I erase the board. All right, so, again, to recap, you are writing your essay about Caesar. I'm going to go through this as Brutus as an example. But you are writing about why Caesar is or isn't not Brutus. Okay, first of all, the first trait is main character. Main character means he is involved in the whole play and is an integral part. So not just somebody that shows up, okay? So is Brutus a main character? Yes. He shows up in Act 1 and he is there for the whole time, okay? For Caesar, you might say, yes, he is. It's called The Tragedy of Julius Caesar. It's all about him. You might say, no, he's not. He dies in Act 3. How could you be a big part of the play if you're not even in half of it? Whatever you think. Just your opinion. Okay, so number 2, character flaw. Character flaw. Does Brutus have a character flaw? Yes. Brutus is too trusting. He believes that everyone is honest because he is honest. And that's great that he is honest, but that does not mean that everyone else is. So that is his character flaw. He is too trusting. Does Caesar have a character flaw? Well, I don't think there's any argument that Caesar has lots of character flaws. Some examples could be he is arrogant. He thinks he is untouchable, and so he does not take any kind of cautions when it comes to his own life. He doesn't pay any attention to any of the warnings or anything like that, okay? Another character flaw of Caesar's is that he is ambitious. That is why the conspirators say they killed him, that he is ambitious. So he wants too much power, and does that contribute to his death? Possibly. So those are 2 good character flaws. I don't think you can argue he doesn't have flaws. He has flaws. He's also gullible. That's another one. He's very easy to confuse. So, anyway. Number 3, dies because of the character flaw. So, does Brutus die because of his character flaw? We say he is too trusting. Does that contribute to his death? Of course it does. He wouldn't have been in this situation if it hadn't been for Cassius taking advantage of him and Brutus trusting Cassius's instincts. He wouldn't be in this situation if he hadn't trusted Antony not to turn the townspeople against him, and then that's exactly what he did. So yes, Brutus's being too trusting contributes to his death. Now for Caesar, for instance, you might be saying he's arrogant. Okay, does his arrogance contribute to his death? You might say yes, because if he wasn't so arrogant, he would have seen the signs that he should watch out. You might say no, it's not his fault, he got stabbed. It doesn't matter how you put it, it's not your own fault, you get stabbed. Whatever you think, okay? If you're talking about ambition, so Caesar's flaw being ambition, does ambition kill Caesar? You might say yes, because that's why the conspirators killed him. He was so ambitious. You might say no. Again, the conspirators killed him for their own selfish reasons. It had nothing to do with Caesar. You can't be responsible for your own murder. Okay? It's your opinion. Finally, maintains honor after death. Does Brutus maintain honor after death? Yes, he does. Because even his enemy says Brutus was the noblest Roman of them all. So even his enemy says that he should be honored for what he did and why he did it. So yes, Brutus maintains honor after death. Does Caesar maintain honor? You might say yes. Antony wages a war against the conspirators to avenge Caesar's death. So he's being honored. You might say no. Antony going to war after Caesar's death has nothing to do with the way he felt about Caesar and everything to do with the way he felt about himself being in power. So whatever your opinion is on that is what you write about. Again, for you are writing about Caesar. Brutus fits the characteristics. What I want you to do is go through the characteristics just like we did just now with Brutus and look at them for Caesar and decide where he falls. If he does not meet even one of the criteria, then he cannot be a tragic hero. So he has to meet all 4 criteria in order to be considered a tragic hero. Okay? All right, so finally, what's the point? I told you previously that the reason we teach Shakespeare is not because you need to know these stories. Although I can argue that maybe knowing a little bit about an ancient ruler who was arrogant and pompous and gullible and thought that he knew everything and thought that he knew better than anyone else and wanted to take over the world, maybe in 2020, that is a story that's worth noticing. Aside from that, the reason we read Shakespeare is to start something that you don't understand and figure it out. So hopefully by listening to Shakespeare's words and reading Shakespeare's words and hearing me tell you the story and listening to those videos that are on the website and reading the summaries and going through the worksheets, hopefully you have sat down to something you thought you would never understand, and by the end, here we are at the end, hopefully you get it. You have toughed it out and you figured it out. I'm proud of you for listening. I'm proud of you for following along and doing what you need to do. Turn your stuff in, do the best you can, and everything's going to be fine. So stay well, take care of yourself. Mrs. Ginder signing out for Julius Caesar 2020.